Hi, I'm Katharine, Asian Canadian author, wife, and mother of two. As we're experiencing an unprecedented time in history, I'd like to paint you a picture. We're social distancing. We're physically apart from one another. How are you connecting with your parents? If you're fortunate that they're alive, there are two situations. Situation A, you live at home with them. They're in the next room or they're downstairs watching TV, and you're struggling to maintain peace. Or B, you've moved out and they're halfway across the world or perhaps just down the street. In either situation, you're feeling frustrated, you're worried because you don't know how to support them. You're stuck in what I call a guilt and disappointment cycle, in which when you set your expectations high, and you constantly check in on them, you share your life with them, you video conference them, but the response and the reaction that they give you isn't what you expect, and you feel disappointed. Time goes on, you lower your expectations, you do less, you check in on them less. Time goes by, and guilt starts to set in, and you feel like a horrible son or a horrible daughter, and you start to self-loathe. So how do we break this vicious cycle? I recently published a book titled How to Deal with Asian Parents. And in it, I describe to you 5 steps that are easy to remember, which include why, what, how, when, and who. So first, you self-reflect on why the relationship you have with your parents is important. Next, it's finding common ground and discovering what you can talk to your parents about. After, it's figuring out how to have that conversation and creating an optimal environment and opportunity for you to muster enough courage to initiate a difficult conversation. Next, you self-reflect and you learn when you can accept your parents for who they are. And lastly, most importantly, it's learning to love and embrace who you are, everything in your past, your background, and your history, so you can create and shape the future that you want. Today, because I only have 10 minutes, I'm going to share with you the first step, which is the why. I'm going to share with you my why and my story in hopes that it will inspire you to figure out your why. Growing up, my dad and I were like oil and water. I remember when I was 14 years old, I was practicing piano and he was vacuuming and I couldn't hear myself play. So I got up, walked over to him and I said, "Fuck you, Dad." And that was our relationship. And then I moved out in my 20s. And our relationship got a little bit better because the limited contact that I had with him made our interactions more tolerable. And I started thinking about our relationship, but it didn't really hit home until I became a mom. My daughter and I, we have this routine of making muffins on the weekend, while my husband, who's a realtor, does his open houses. And then one day I just said to him, "I'm gonna make more bread instead of muffins." And he says, "Sure, just don't make so much." Suddenly, a wave of hurt feelings come into me and I bark at him. "What do you mean I make too much? I don't waste that stuff. That stuff doesn't get wasted." He looks at me, he's dumbfounded, just flabbergasted. And I take a moment to self-reflect. And I say to myself, why am I feeling so strongly? Why am I emotionally triggered right now? Growing up, my mom would show her love through food. And she'd often get very creative in the kitchen, from using ingredients from the West to the East. And my dad, who's a traditionalist, would often tell her, "Don't make too much." So when my husband said those exact words to me, it triggered me. So I look at my daughter and I look at him and I say to myself, I'm not going to start a fight with him. I have an opportunity here to change my history. I can change the history for my daughter. I don't have to respond in the way that my mom would have responded, which would have been, "I'm not making it for you, I'm making it for my daughters. Go to hell." That type of thing. So instead, I share with my husband this story. So the reason why I want to improve the relationship with my parents is because the more I understand and know them, the more I understand and know myself, and the more self-aware I become. And the better wife, the better mother, the better sister, the better friend, the better aunt, the better grandma, potentially, I could be. So how did you discover your why and what your why is? To be honest, I can't tell you what your why is because you have a very different background, a very different history than me. And the relationship that you have with your parents is very different than mine. But with the time that we have at home, we can conduct some self-reflection. And here are some coaching questions to help you get the juices flowing. So why is the relationship that you have with your parents important? Think of a time when they emotionally triggered you. How did you feel? Frustrated, worried, anger, guilt. Where did the desire to go see them again or connect with them again come from? What values, beliefs, and priorities did they instill in you? Which ones align? And which ones do you struggle to accept and embrace? What does your ideal relationship with your parents look like if you had the perfect relationship? What if you did nothing in the relationship and then they suddenly passed away? How would you feel? How would you feel if they didn't know you? And how would you feel if you didn't know them? So take a moment to think about this. And during this time, you may come to the conclusion or come to a realization that their toxicity and their pain and their abuse is a threat to your well-being. And this decision doesn't come lightly, but it is okay to cut ties with your parents, and you can start limiting contact. You may be in a situation where you feel like the status quo you're content with. And so during your interactions, you're going to grip and grin, you're going to go on your phone, you're going to mentally check out, you're going to do the bare minimum to get by because you are aligned with the fact that your physical presence meets your own expectations and theirs. Rinse and repeat. But if you're like me and you want to get to know your parents, and you want to get to know your parents because you want to get to know yourself, you want to understand where your roots came from, where you came from, your background, and also know more about your culture, possibly something that you've rejected a lot of your life, then it's time to have those conversations. And it's time to create expectations and manage them. And you have to mentally prepare yourself in case that you don't find the answers that you need. Next, it's finding common ground with them, having conversations, and then it's creating the optimal opportunity and environment to muster enough courage to have a difficult conversation. Then it's learning when to accept your parents for who they are. And lastly, it's about loving yourself, who you are, where you came from, embracing the background and the history that you have so that you can shape your future. You do not have to become your parents. You have the power and the control to change your destiny and your happiness and fulfillment. You can change who you are. You can create the future that you want. You can create the family dynamics that you want. You can become a better mentor, a better guide, a better coach, a better leader, a better role model than they were to us. So let's have a better relationship with our parents, because let's face it, they're not getting any younger. Thank you.